I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Welcome to Conflict Uncovered. It's July 29th in the evening here in Israel, Monday evening, and here's what's been going on for the last couple of days. Saturday afternoon, a Hezbollah rocket fired into the Druze village on the Golan, Majdal Shams, killed 12 children in a playground, wounded dozens more, and in doing so, Hezbollah enacted something that I've been talking about and saying has been threatened for many, many years, that I've referred to as the nursery school scenario. Now, the nursery school scenario could be a nursery school, it could be a summer camp, or, as in this case, a playground, in which a number of children, in this case 12, were killed, not necessarily intentionally, and here I want to break this down for a moment before I go on. I don't believe, we can't be certain, but I don't believe that Hezbollah fired the rocket with the intention of killing 12 children. They fired the rocket intentionally. They fired intentionally into a populated area. And if they do that enough, and they have been doing it enough, it's only a matter of time, and they know it as well as we, that a rocket will have the effect that it did this past Saturday. Tragic murder of 12 children. It puts Israel now in a strategic dilemma, because in the immediate aftermath, as expected, the United States and most of the West condemned the Hezbollah attack, expressed condolences for those who were killed. The U.S. explicitly said we support Israel's right to defend itself, and then in the same breath said, as long as there's no escalation. And here, of course, the no escalation is somewhat disingenuous, because if killing 12 children isn't an escalation, what is? But it's only if Israel responds that there's escalation, or considered to be escalation, and the threat of a regional war. Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Washington when the attack took place. He flew back and arrived yesterday. No major strategic decision was going to be made before his arrival and the meeting of the war cabinet, and then the political military cabinet, and prior to that, meetings with heads of the military. But here, let's be clear. The plans for a response or an attack on Hezbollah didn't wait until Netanyahu's return. They didn't wait till the nursery school scenario came into existence. The army has been preparing plans to deal with Hezbollah in one way or another now for well over a decade. And I served a number of years in Northern Command. Any military that doesn't have some operational plans to deal with its immediate enemies is not really a military, and the IDF is certainly a military. What's waiting, and which took place yesterday and last night, was the approval of the political echelon over which plans to enact, and we don't know what that was, because we're still waiting for the actual implementation of the plans. The Israeli dilemma is a difficult one. My advisor in graduate school at the University of Chicago, Morris Janowitz, used to teach that the only real decisions you ever have to make are choosing between bad and worse. Between good and bad, anybody can make a decision. Between good and good, why agonize over it? Just pick one. But between bad and worse, you really have to sit and work out which is the bad and which is the worse, knowing that the less worst is still a bad decision. So with that in mind, the decision to go to war is a bad decision. It may be the right decision, but it's not good. And that, with the pressure of the West, with Britain threatening an arms embargo on Israel in the coming days, the United States still supplying Israel with arms, but showing a certain shakiness over it. The decision to go to war is a very difficult one under the best of circumstances, even more difficult under these circumstances. The alternative is some sort of symbolic retaliation, painful though it may be. In other words, stepping up the tit for tat that we've been doing with Hezbollah now since October, doing some damage, but not enough to elicit a massive response from Hezbollah that might spiral into a war. This would be a frame of attempted restoring of deterrence that failed miserably on October 7th. And in my opinion, the term deterrence should have been completely dropped from the Israeli military and political lexicon already on October 7th. We're not deterring these people. Over the course of those months, we've been hammering back and forth with Hezbollah, and we've discussed this in earlier podcasts. It's not working. If anything, Hezbollah is doing the classic incremental increase escalation, trying to operate within the elastic red lines of Israeli maintenance of the status quo. And what I mean by that is this. Up until a month or so ago, most of Hezbollah's fire, rockets, drones, anti-tank missiles, have been into the belt along the border that was largely evacuated in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. In other words, they were firing into largely empty towns, villages, kibbutzim, moshavim. There are still some people there, but not a full population. The children have been evacuated. Most families have been evacuated. So the chances of inadvertently killing or injuring people was relatively low, although there were casualties. But still, the nursery school scenario was a highly unlikely one. And just as an example, in the past couple of weeks, their rockets and missiles did hit 3 schools in that evacuated zone. But of course, those 3 schools didn't have anybody in them. They were just the structures themselves. Over the past couple of weeks, Hezbollah has been incrementally increasing its range into populated areas that were not evacuated. And in doing so, they greatly increased the chances of what actually happened on this past Saturday, and that is that there would be a rocket that would cause a large number of civilian casualties, and of course, the worst case of all scenarios, a large number of children casualties. Hezbollah knew that, and they did it anyway. And one of the reasons they did it, I can't go through all of their reasoning, but one of the reasons they did it was the confidence that Israel would be pressured by the world not to respond in an overwhelming fashion. And this is where we're sitting right now at this moment. There's been some artillery fire, some airstrikes on our part over the past couple of hours. We have not greatly increased, although I suspect that that's not really the response that we're going to list. But the reality is that in the situation that Israel finds itself at the moment, its 2 options are to either respond too much or too little. And there is no proper amount. And what I mean by that is this. If the Israeli response is not enough to elicit a massive response from Hezbollah, then it's insufficient to convince them that they should stop doing what they're doing. In other words, if Israel responds in some sort of even painful but cosmetic way, sending a message, what we're likely to see over the next few weeks is a continued incremental increase of Hezbollah attacks, moving further and further south, not in great leaps, but another kilometer here, another town that was just outside the range. And the logic of that incremental escalation is a very simple one. You've absorbed the attacks up until now. Are you going to go to war because we've increased the range by another half mile, and another half mile, and another half mile? This is what's known euphemistically as salami tactics. Anybody who's ever eaten a salami knows you don't eat the whole thing all at once. You eat it one slice at a time, preferably the thinnest slice you possibly can, one at a time. When you're finished with the slices, there's no salami left. On the other hand, if Israel responds in a massive fashion that draws a massive Hezbollah response, it means that we've struck them hard, painfully, in a way that they can't ignore. That could very easily spiral into a full-scale shooting war in Lebanon at least, although it's my belief that Iran is not going to get directly involved in a war with Hezbollah, simply because Hezbollah exists to protect Iran and not the other way around. But nonetheless, if that happens, Israel will be blamed by the world, and I'm not interested in the Arab world and the Muslim world and Russia and China and all of their friends, but the West and the United States will either implicitly or explicitly blame Israel for the outbreak of broad fighting, and of course in which many innocent Lebanese civilians will be displaced, killed, injured, and the like. And this will all be put at Israel's doorstep for not reasonably accepting the murder of 12 children. So that's where we're sitting at the moment. I'm not going to predict. I think that as I said, it's the evening of Monday, the 29th of July. I believe that the next 24 to 48 hours will be decisive in terms of what Israel's response will be. I say that hesitantly because I'm putting a general bracket on it. But we'll know much more, I think, over the next couple of days. And right now we're sort of at the edge, at the starting line, and I'm not going to predict anything beyond that. So thanks for being with us. Conflict Uncovered, your place to go, and stay tuned, stay safe. Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.